It began on an ordinary summer morning. A young boy walks to school in Hiroshima, Japan. The air is clear, the sky bright and blue. His mind drifts toward drawing games, the small certainties of childhood. And then a flash. A flash so blinding it erases the sky for a moment. Hit, pressure, silence. A city disappears beneath a single devastating moment. Under the rebels, he survives, but many he loves do not. And in that unimaginable instant, everything shifts. One day, that boy will choose to create over destroy. One day, that boy will choose creation over destruction, movement over stillness, lightness over fear. That day will come much later, but its spark is born here. Today, we're telling the story of a designer who turned technology into fabric, and fabric into a new language of luxury. Today, we're telling the story of Issey Miyake. Before we dive into his ideas, let's pause for a moment and talk about his biography. Issey Miyake was born in Hiroshima in 1938 and grew up in a country rebuilding itself from the ground up. He went on to study graphic design at Tama Art University in Tokyo. Then he left Japan in the mid-60s for Paris, where he trained in couture and worked for houses like Guy Laroche and Givenchy. From there, he spent time in New York, absorbing American sportswear and working with designer Geoffrey Beene, before returning to Tokyo in 1970 to found his own studio, introducing a new experimental voice from Japan. Over the decades, he would build a whole universe of lines and concepts, from his groundbreaking pleated pieces to the simple black mock turtlenecks he created for his friend Steve Jobs, which quietly became one of the most recognizable uniforms in the tech industry. All of that biography is very important, but what truly sets Issey Miyake apart is not where he went or who he worked for, but it's the whole design language that he created. Indeed, he completely reimagined what clothing and even luxury itself could be. When you look at Issey Miyake's work, it's tempting to call it luxury, but his idea of luxury is very different from what we're used to. For Miyake, luxury was never about logos, red carpets, or clothes so delicate you're afraid to sit down. In fact, luxury to him meant clothing that makes your life easier and more comfortable, not harder. Clothes you can move in, wash easily, fold into a suitcase, wear for years. What does this actually do for the person who's wearing it? And this is the reason why he gravitated towards technical fabrics like polyester, which you can imagine many traditional luxury brands used to avoid a lot because, well, it's plastic essentially. But where others saw a cheap material, Miyake saw potential, a fiber that could be pleated, heat set, stretched, washed, and still look beautiful. Issey Miyake's studio looked a lot different from what you can imagine. His studio functioned almost like a research lab. Yes, there were pattern makers and seamstresses. There were also textile engineers, technicians, and people who were actually almost like scientists in a way. It was not only about how can we cut the dress, but it was mostly about how can I transform this material? And sometimes it was even like How can we invent a completely new material? He treated fabric as a starting point for experimentation by pressing it, by folding it, by knitting it in new ways. But he combined traditional techniques with new technological innovations. His exhibitions with names like Making Things or the work of Miyake Issey show him not as a stylist chasing seasonal trends, but as a designer constantly doing research. Inside the studio, he encouraged his teams to think from zero. Forget what a dress or a coat was supposed to look like and instead start from the body to clothes. Out of that mindset grew some of the most innovative clothing of the late 20th and early 21st century. Pleating has existed in fashion for a long time, but Issey Miyake really took it to another level. Traditionally, you pleat the fabric first, then cut and sew the garment. Miyake flipped that process. His team would create an oversized piece of clothing first, cut, sewn, finished, and then fold the entire garment and run it through a heat pressing process. The pleats were set into the finished form. And because of the properties of the fiber, they would remember their shape. The result was clothing that felt almost impossible. You could crumple it into a ball, toss it into a suitcase, pull it out at your destination. It would still fall perfectly over your body. It was expanding and contracting as you moved, as your body changed, and as your life changed. So artists, architects, and performers fell in love with it because it allowed them to move and think without worrying about the garment. Miyake once wrote that clothes should bestow freedom on those who wear them. And Please to Please makes that idea quite literal. Freedom is built into every fold. If Please to Please reimagined how a finished garment behaves, Epoch reimagined how a garment was made in the very first place. Epoch, short for a piece of cloth, might be one of Miyake's most radical ideas. Instead of thinking in terms of individual patterns and pieces, he and textile engineer Dai Fujiwara designed entire rolls of fabric on industrial knitting and weaving machines. These fabrics were produced as continuous tubes or panels, with the outlines of clothes already integrated into the weave. When the fabric came up the machine, it looked like a kind of graphic puzzle. Shapes of dresses, tops, socks, even hats suggested within a single piece. The wearer could then cut along the lines they needed, leaving the rest for later. There was almost no waste at all. It's an elegant response to two problems: textile waste and the gap between personal expression and mass production. Epoch allows clothes to be made efficiently at scale while still letting the wearer decide how to activate it. The customer becomes a quiet co-designer in a way. Museums and design critics recognized Epoch as a milestone. It's not just a collection, it's a new manufacturing philosophy. In his later years, Issey Miyake didn't retreat into nostalgia. If anything, he became even more innovative and proactive. He brought together a group of young designers and researchers under the name Reality Lab, a team devoted to exploring tomorrow's manufacturing. Their most well-known project is 132.5 maybe, Point Issey Miyake. The name itself is a little riddle. 1 for a single piece of clothes, 3 and 2 for the transformation between 2 and 3 dimensions, and 5 for the idea that when a person wears the piece, it gains a new 5th dimension: time, movement, life. These garments often begin as flat, folded shapes, inspired by origami and generated using computer algorithms in collaboration with scientists. Jun Mitani. Laid on the table, they look like intricate geometric sculptures, but when you pick them up and slip them on, they unfold into softly structured dresses, tops, and coats. Fabrics are usually made from recycled polyester spun from plastic bottles, another nod to responsibility and sustainability. Once again, Miyake ties together technology, environmental concern, and playfulness. Reality Lab was like a conversation between disciplines, generations, and materials. But Miyake didn't stop at clothes. His ideas flowed into different objects and means of expressions throughout time. There's another side to Issey Miyake that doesn't involve pleats or piece of clothes at all, but still reflects his way of thinking, his fragrances. In the early 90s, when most prestige perfumes were heavy, loud, and wrapped in ornate bottles, Miyake did something very different. In 1902, he launched his first fragrance, L'eau d'Issey, literally the water of Issey. He wanted to capture something far more elemental, the idea of having water on the skin, literally. He once described water as the greatest material and a constant source of inspiration. The scent that emerged, an airy aquatic floral, was quite revolution, a clear and luminous signature in a world of heavy perfumes. L'eau d'Issey quickly became an international success and helped usher in an entire wave of fresh, watery fragrances in the 90s. A men's version followed along with many later interpretations, but the core idea remained the same: simplicity, clarity, and a deep respect for nature. Miyake and his design studio were closely involved not just into scent, but in everything around it. The bottle, the name, the packaging, the visuals. The minimalist, almost architectural bottle design echoed his closing: clean lines, subtle geometry, and a sense of light traveling through transparent material like sunlight through water. Looking back across his work, from Please Please to Epoch to his perfumes, from 132.5 to the many experiments of Reality Lab, you start to see a pattern. Miyake has quietly redefined what luxury and design can mean. He helped shift the conversation from "is this fashionable?" to "how does this help us live?" His clothes are at once deeply conceptual and deeply humane. It's the luxury of not worrying whether your outfit is going to survive the day or not. He quite literally expanded the definition of fashion to include craft, sustainability, and empathy. In his later years, Miyake gradually stepped away from designing the main collections himself, leaving the work in the hands of teams he had trained and trusted. While he focused more on research and cultural projects, he continued to be a quiet, steady presence in the background of his brand, less interested in fame than in making sure the ideas could continue with him. Thank you for joining the SCP Luxury Podcast. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for joining the SCP Luxury Society podcast, and see you next time.